Today, we become legends.
So with year 10 of Smite being revealed and the patch notes coming up very soon, I thought I'd give my first initial impressions and just talk about everything that's been revealed so far and my thoughts on the good, the bad, and everything in between. Be sure to leave your own thoughts on these changes down below. I'll be interested to read what the community thinks about year 10 Smite. But without further ado, let's jump in. So the first thing I'll talk about is the new map, since that's what I'm most excited about personally, as it will be the change that has the most overall impact on how Smite feels and plays for me, since I play 95% Conquest. The art style of the new map is overall an improvement. I'm not super stoked on it, but it definitely does look nice from what I've seen so far. I especially like the white and blue marble trim that appears along the bottom of a bunch of the terrain walls. It adds a nice bit of contrast to the greys and browns of the terrain. If anything though, the areas outside the map are what actually grabs my interest the most. The beach is returning to duo side with a giant Colossus style statue which is going to look sick to battle alongside, while solo lane has this sort of destroyed and lava covered landscape with what looks to be a volcano caldera or something like that. Each side has a clear theme, with the calm blues and greens of the duo side contrasting with the aggressive reds and blacks of the solo side. But I can't talk about the new map and not mention those absolutely stunning new Titan rune designs. Being fully enclosed will give a real sense of a true base defense and base siege, with the Order side being a grand Greek and Roman themed temple of sorts, and Chaos being the mouth of a giant cave. Sieging is going to be glorious in year 10. Besides art though, there's also gameplay changes, some of which we don't know the full details of yet, but a major one is being able to pull camps to anywhere on the map. This has major implications for the game, not just in terms of starting strategies, but also for invades, jungle pathing and farming efficiency, and more. In terms of starts, this is going to majorly change the way every single role starts the game. We don't know exactly how far you can pull the camp yet. It could be only a certain distance away before it de-aggroes, it could be the entire jungle but once you enter a lane it de-aggroes, or it could literally be the whole map, you can pull them into lanes and stuff. I think it's most likely to be option 2, where the camps will follow you anywhere in the jungle but give up chase after you enter a lane. For starting strats, this means, for example, mids and solos could pull their red and blue buff right to the edge of the lane while fighting it and save a few seconds getting into lane. Duo lane could potentially pull purple and green at once, drag them into one spot in between and kill both at once for better efficiency. Jungler and mid could do a similar thing with red and speed depending on how far you can pull them and if you can pull them through mid lane. Junglers could also pull their speed to their back camps and AoE down all 3 camps at once instead of individually like they need to do now. The implications for game start are endless, and once we get more info on this system, I imagine the pros will break it wide open and showcase a bunch of new starts that us normies wouldn't have even thought of. It's not just starts though, this change also affects invades in a major way. At the moment, the Invader's Curse makes invades very hard to do. We have seen a tiny bit of purple buff invading at Worlds, but for the most part invading is still quite niche. With this new system though, you could aggro the enemy's buff and run away into your own jungle where the curse won't affect you and then kill the camp. It'll still be risky because you're massively slowed by the curse and will need some time to run into your own jungle, but for example, if supports run in and pull the enemy purple while their ADC does green, then drag it back to your own purple with their ADC and clear both at once, that could be really interesting. Invades could return in a major way with this system unless Hi-Rez implements some kind of countermeasure against it. And finally for this change, it will just overall improve farm efficiency of camps. Junglers are the main benefactor of this. Simple stuff like pulling both back camps on solo side together and hitting all 5 at once rather than doing them individually. Pulling mid camps into the lane if that's possible and farming them alongside the enemy wave for efficiency reasons. This could catapult junglers into being very strong depending on how much farm is available in the new jungle. If it's the same or more farm, then expect junglers to be pretty fed once everyone figures out the best strats to capitalize on this new mechanic of pulling camps to wherever you please. This is a very spicy change and I expect the jungle meta to be flipped on its head at the launch of year 10, especially since we also have the introduction of roaming camps which will further spice up the jungle. In the keynote we just saw a Cyclops assassin popping out of a chest which presumably would start roaming the jungle and provide some kind of unique reward, perhaps related to the bastions which we'll talk about in a second. They did say there will be roaming camps, plural, so there may be one more alongside the Cyclops. Presumably these would be neutral camps as they roam the neutral jungle areas, rather than having one for each team on their side, which is going to result in mini skirmishes between junglers and potentially laners to secure these, assuming the reward for them is good. But another new mechanic for year 10 Conquest is the bastions, which seemingly weaken enemy towers for you. I would imagine these are trebuchet replacements that are obtained via the obelisk, since they fill a similar role and having both might be a bit too much, but it's possible they have a new system for how you acquire these. But that's pretty much everything we know about the new Conquest map so far, so let's move on to talking about the god lineup for year 10. So first up we have Surtur, who looks amazing so far. Visually he's one of the coolest looking gods in a while, and playing as the fire giant is going to be so much fun. From the little kit info we've seen so far, it appears his ultimate will be him dropping down as a giant fireball like in the FG entrance animation, and we will have some kind of line attack where he throws an imp that deals damage and leaves it behind as a familiar that will attack enemies and maybe even has synergy with the rest of his kit, we'll have to see. We'll be getting more info on Surtur in the full notes in a few days, but from what we've seen so far, he looks amazing visually, but his gameplay doesn't seem that revolutionary. We only have snippets though, and it's definitely possible he's way more interesting gameplay design wise than he looks from this brief overview. As for other gods coming, these are all speculation, but if the popular consensus is correct, we have some absolute banger gods coming this year. With Maman Brigitte still coming, hopefully as a utility mage, Charon is another highly requested god that has some really interesting lore. It's a shot in the dark, but it could be awesome if he had some way to enter the spirit world or even take enemies with him onto the River of Souls, perhaps as some kind of isolationist 1v1 style thing where they're separated from the rest of the map for a few seconds, maybe that's his ultimate. I don't know too much about Ixchel lore-wise, who is likely the third god coming, but visually I think this could be one of the coolest gods we've ever seen. The colours are just beautiful in the reveal teaser and from what I've seen online. The second god is probably the most up in the air, with a lot of things pointing towards it being the Manticore or some other similar mythical beast, while other signs like the fire and lava themes could point towards it being Typhon, which would give us two new gods that have items named after them in this year. We do at least know that this second god will be a monster of some kind though, since it's being in the season of monsters. Overall, I'm super excited for basically every god in this lineup. The only one I'm not majorly stoked on is the Manticore / Typhon. Surtur looks amazing, Ixchel I would welcome for the visuals alone, and a new Mayan god after 6 to 7 years is very hype. And Charon and Maman Brigitte are two that have been heavily requested for ages by the community and have tons of potential. Overall, I'd say the god lineup is 9 out of 10 this year if the predictions hold true. Alright, so moving on to talking about some gameplay changes, firstly we have the new shards. I have mixed feelings on this system. On one hand, I like the idea of more strategy being implemented into those early few levels, but on the other hand, I don't really like the idea of having to overwrite Vision Shard to use one of these. People already don't ward enough, mainly in lower levels of play, and at the launch of the new year, everyone is going to want to try these new shards out, so probably no one is going to be using Vision Shard. I am excited for these and the effects look cool, but I do somehow wish the free wards was kept in some way. Moving on to the class-based stat bonuses, this is something I don't really like, to be honest. I get where they're coming from with it, to diversify the classes and make them feel more different to play, but in making the classes different from each other, it feels like these changes will make gods within those classes feel more similar to each other. It's part of the sad trend of high-res making gods conform rigidly to the class archetypes and roles, rather than just designing cool gods and letting them settle into whatever role and playstyle makes sense for them. Playing off roles will now be even less incentivized, for example, with ESET or Nox support getting power instead of CCR, which is much less useful in support. It also nerfs some gods that don't directly conform to their class identity Titan have set out for them. For example, Erlang Shen doesn't really care about CDR for warriors, but King Arthur absolutely loves it, so this will buff ability warriors and nerf auto attack warriors. Of course, CDR is useful on anyone, but it's distinctly more useful on some warriors than it is on others. A similar thing would happen with ability hunters like Chiron and Ula. Sure, extra scaling on their basic attacks is still useful, but it's not as useful as it would be on purely basic attacking hunters like Rama. I don't completely hate this system, but I don't love it either. It's just a meh change that could be completely scrapped and I wouldn't really care. We'll also have to see exact numbers on this, since it will definitely have to be carefully balanced. For example, if the penetrations for assassins is flat pen and not percent pen and there's a lot of it, it could make assassins far too strong early on. But yeah, I'm indifferent on this change. What do you guys think about it? Let me know down below. In terms of general item changes, they've said 45 major changes are coming, which depending on their definition of major could be a really good thing for the game. If major means huge stat changes or entire reworks for items, I'm super hyped for this. Smite's item meta has been the same for far too long, and year 10 seems like a perfect time to completely flip it on its head, so I'm not just building the entire mace tree and the entire Morningstar tree every single game on every ability assassin. If, however, their definition of major changes is just shifting stats around and nerfing or buffing items, I'm a little bit less hyped. It will still be welcome, of course, but I would prefer major reworks for a lot of the items and huge shifts for others. The two new items they've added do look very cool though. They both have unique effects that you have to somewhat actively manage, and I'm very excited to use Cannoneer's Cuirass in the solo lane. Multi-queue being back is great too. This should hopefully bring some players back to the less popular modes, as I know personally back in the day when we had multi-queue, I would basically either just queue solo conquest or I would multi-queue every single casual mode at once and not really mind which one I got. So this should help improve matchmaking as well. Speaking of matchmaking, we're getting a hard reset in ranked and full crossplay. This was overdue in my opinion, and anyone who's complaining about there being trash console noobs in your ranked games doesn't understand how matchmaking actually works. Are there trash console players? Yes. Are there trash PC players? Yes. Those trash players will get put together in the trash lobbies. Are there intermediate console players? Yes. Intermediate PC players? Yes. Put those guys together in intermediate lobbies. The only time this system might actually matter is at the very top echelons of ranked play, where the top 1% of PC players will outclass the top 1% of console players. But if matchmaking is doing its job, it will just mean that at the very top level of lobbies, they will remain basically PC only, with maybe the occasional godlike console player having enough MMR to get into those lobbies. Matchmaking doesn't care about your input method, it only cares about your MMR. If your MMR is slightly lower because you're on controller, you'll just get put in slightly lower MMR lobbies with PC players that are slightly worse than you. Now granted, this assumes matchmaking actually works flawlessly, which we all know it doesn't, but the base point that every console player is worse than every PC player is simply not true. There are console players out there way better than me and way better than you. There are also console players way worse than me and you, but they will just get put in the low MMR games they should be in, and input method won't matter. This also comes with a hard reset to MMR, which I think is necessary to enable ranked crossplay, otherwise the MMRs of console and PC players won't be equivalent to each other and you would end up with really wacky lobbies as a result. The hard reset will be rough in the first few months, and we all have to pray not to lose our first few games and get dumped into elo hell for the rest of the year, but after that I think ranked crossplay will be overall very positive for the game. And the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is the personalized history videos. I personally love this idea, and it shows the guys at Titanforge do really care about this community. Do they sometimes make shit changes and ruin the game for a few weeks? Absolutely. But this kind of stuff shows they have a deep passion for the game, and any bad changes they make are just miscalculations. They didn't need to do this, but they did anyway, and I'm personally really hyped to see my video covering my almost 10 years playing this game. But that's all I've got for my initial thoughts on Year 10 Smite. The full patch notes will be coming on Wednesday 18th, so be sure to tune into those to get the full changes coming, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.